Today it's 15 mistakes guitarists make, and I've made some of these as well. Stop making these mistakes. Hello and welcome to another video with me, Elmo Karjalainen. It's good to have you along. You can call me this guy if my name is tricky to pronounce. Today I'm here to help you with mistakes that you might be making. These are in no particular order, so let's start with number 1. Bends and vibrato. You need to get these sorted. I don't think there are many things that are worse than hearing a guitar player who bends out of tune or who has terrible vibrato. And I mean, I hear actual top-of-the-line professional guitar players who have bends all over the place at times. So let's compare. Well-known song by Gary Moore. You probably know the song. Now let's do it properly. And why would you not get that stuff in order? I mean, it's just so important for this instrument. Okay, so while I was editing this, I realized that maybe I could show you really briefly what I mean with bending mistakes and how to correct those. So one thing I see very often is people having their thumb low behind the neck and making the vibrato or the bend, doing it with their fingers. So vibrato and bends for me work pretty much the same way. Something like this. Not very nice. You don't have as much control. So I would suggest thumb over the neck, nice grip, and you just basically lock the fingers and let the wrist make the motion and bends. If you want something to practice bends with, this is a great one because you don't have to worry about pitch that much. Just do that. Something like that. If you want more detailed explanations and lessons on that, I have that stuff in my Guitar Academy. You get access via my Patreon. There's a link in the description. So get your bends in order. Number 2. Ignoring non-guitar music, and you could broaden this into ignoring other genres of music than the one that you're playing. I'll take 2 examples of this. Ignoring, let's say, piano music. What's the biggest difference between guitar and piano? For me, I would say it's the fact that piano players cannot bend. They can't bend the notes. So that kind of limits them, but that also makes them have to concentrate more on the things that they can do, such as dynamics, for instance. We can learn a lot about dynamics from piano players. Another example would be ignoring jazz if you play metal. Just an example. It can really give you ideas outside of what you normally do if you listen to other types of music as well. I'm not saying you need to learn jazz, but listen to it occasionally. Be open to other things. One great example is Fredrik Thorendal of Meshuggah, whose solos often go a bit outside, and at least I think that they're quite influenced by jazz. Number 3, not setting goals. I occasionally get students who come in and I ask them, what do you want to be as a guitar player? And they kind of say, I don't know. And then I ask them, well, who do you listen to? And they kind of go, I don't know. And I know I'm fighting a losing battle as a teacher at that point. I mean, how will you learn an instrument properly if you don't know where you're going? It's kind of like going for a walk. I mean, it can be fun, just walking around aimlessly. But you won't really get anywhere. If you have a goal, it's much easier to get there. I'm not saying everything has to be goal-oriented. I mean, you can absolutely just sit around and enjoy the guitar without having huge goals. But if you want to become something on guitar, it helps to set goals. Set a big goal and then break that down into smaller goals, saying something like, I want to be like Gary Moore. You can then deconstruct what he does, and he bends notes. You learn that. You learn vibrato. You learn picking modes and all that kind of stuff. And you're on your way. And that can be anything. The big goal can be, I want to be Pat Metheny. I want to be Steve Vai. I want to be Jeff Beck, whatever. It can be combinations of those. I want to be like Gary Mooring, Wim Malmsteen and Steve Vai. But it can't be anything vague like, I want to be the greatest guitar player ever. Okay, great. Which genre? Because they're all different. Number 4, trying to be perfect. Now, trying to be perfect can lead to all kinds of problems. You might not release music because you don't think it's ready, it's not perfect, it's not good enough. You might put off playing live because you're nervous, because you're not good enough, because you want to be perfect. And I would encourage you to shift your thinking in this way. Perfect is a state or thing, something that you are, even though no one is perfect. Whereas getting better is a journey. You might be striving for perfection, knowing you'll never get there, but you'll just keep improving. I often say to my students, I don't care where you're at the moment. What I care about is you getting better. And when you adopt that mindset, you kind of slightly learn to let go of certain fears, and then you can do stuff like, for instance, maybe release music or play live or whatever. And the great thing when you manage to do that is that you actually learn from those mistakes that you are going to make, because you are going to make mistakes. And that's fine. I mean, have a look at the beginning of my YouTube channel. Oh my God, those videos look horrible.
You're gonna have to suffer through another one of these.
Number 5, not focusing when practicing. Now, some distractions that you have will be things that are out of your control. Like, for instance, a roommate, a family member. But certain distractions you can control. This thing, for instance, turn it off. You don't need it. Or if you do, you might have a metronome there that you want to use. Put it in flight mode. Or turn it on quiet and leave it in another room. Because what happens when you're finally getting into the zone, it's really starting to go well, and then the phone rings. Then you have to work your way towards that again. That flow. You will never get into that flow state if you keep getting interrupted. And even a notification can really mess that up. Also, you can tell your family members, roommates, whatever, that when you're practicing you don't want to be disturbed unless there's an emergency. Number 6, I think, not practicing regularly. 15 minutes a day, every day, always beats 5 hours on a Saturday or something like that. 15 minutes a day is not a lot. And I'll tell you a little story that illustrates this. I work as a teacher and I have a colleague who said that when he was doing high school, he had an average grade of around 7.4. And we have periods in high school where during the end of the period there's an exam week. And he knew that slightly before exam week, Grand Theft Auto 4 was going to be released, and he had a PlayStation 3, and he was just going to sit around playing on that PlayStation 3. So he realized he was not going to be able to study like he normally did for the exams. So he decided to do roughly 20 minutes a day, 5 minutes of going through his notes, the ones that he'd done during the day, and then 15 minutes of reading the books that they'd covered or the topics that they'd covered during that day. And he did that for that whole period. And Grand Theft Auto was released, and all he did was go take the exams, come home, play Grand Theft Auto. He didn't do any kind of mass reading before the exams. He just played Grand Theft Auto. But he'd done that 20 minutes a day, basically every day, apart from weekends, and his grade went from 7.5 on average to the last exams being 9.5 on average. That's quite some improvement. So practice regularly. And it doesn't have to be long sessions. Like I said, 15 minutes a day, every day, beats 5 hours on Saturday. And don't worry about that length of practice. Quality beats quantity. You just have to make it regular. Number 7, GAS, Gear Acquisition Syndrome. The thing that I need that thing, or watching endless amounts of YouTube videos, searching for a piece of gear that you think you might need. And I've certainly done this one as well, because what you end up not doing when you're searching for gear, well, you're certainly not practicing. And the thing is, I mean, sometimes we do need a certain piece of gear for something. That's totally fine. But most often I would say that it's just so much better for you to practice on what you have and make that work for you than sit around obsessing about gear. Now they say that sound is in the hands, and that's not entirely true. But give a poor guitar player a great rig to play on and it will still sound poor. Give a great guitar player a poor rig to play on and it will still sound pretty good. Now, if your gear is such that you really, really hate it, it's so terrible that every time you play, you want to just stop playing, then you might need something better. But in most cases, I don't think that's the case. It's just we, creatures of habit, we watch endless amounts of YouTube videos and it feels good and we fantasize. Nice. But practice instead of watching videos. Number 8, I think, trying to do what you think other people want you to do. It's simple, this. Do what you want to do, not what you think other people want you to do. Don't try to write that hit song. Try to write that song that you want to hear. And if that's a hit song, great. You'll be much happier for it. I know this from personal experience. And I've heard it said enough times by others that I think this is just fundamentally true. If you want to write a hit song and that's really what you want, then great, do that. Number 9, timing it poorly. Either playing too much on the beat or not on the beat at all. I think you should learn both because there's a difference. You want to be able to sound really tight and like almost like a machine when you want to, but also play with the time. Depends on style of music. Like if you play the blues and you play a slow blues, you don't want to be like a metronome because that will just ruin everything. But if you're shredding or if you're playing, let's say, riffs with another guitar player, you have to be in sync. Number 10, not learning how to set this thing up properly. Now, I don't mean that you have to learn every trick of the trade, just the basics. It's fairly easy. Truss rod adjustment, setting action, all that kind of stuff. If you can do that, you can set up your instrument nicely. It'll be so much easier to play. It'll be better in tune, which will come as a joyous surprise to your family when you've set up your guitar and it sounds nice and you've learned your bends. Number 11, and this is a big one again, not measuring progress. Why is measuring progress so important? Well, because it will give you added motivation when you notice that actually you've improved. Now you can do this at least 2 ways. You can measure progress with a metronome, so that would be speed-based progress, how fast you can play this, for instance. But it doesn't have to be metronome. It can be bends. It can be how you sound when you play, just generally, or if whatever you're working on at the moment, vibrato, slides. And that's slightly more tricky than using a metronome, but a metronome is great for that speed-based stuff. Film yourself. I mean, recording yourself is great. You can do that as well. Filming yourself gives you the added benefit of you actually seeing what it is that you do, and you can use that to correct certain things. So if you notice that you're, for instance, doing vibrato and it sounds weird, and you notice that most other people do vibrato like this, they have the thumb over here. If you filmed yourself, you can go, oh yeah, that's true. You can imitate others. That's great. Just as an example. And when you notice, you go back, let's say you film yourself once a week, you go back 4 weeks or something and you've worked on your bends and your vibrato, you go back and you check out that first video that you did and you realize, I've actually gone forward much more than I thought I had. That will give you renewed motivation and inspire you to play even more. Brilliant stuff. Number 12, practicing everything, which means you practice nothing, really. Not honing down on one thing at a time. Maximum 2 things at a time, I would say. There's no point in you Monday practicing speed picking. Tuesday doing your bends. Wednesday doing modes. Thursday, I think I'll do tapping. Friday, practicing your string skipping. Saturday, chicken picking. Sunday, playing guitar behind your neck. What will you learn? Nothing. Focus on one or two things at a time, especially if you're doing 15 minutes a day. Keep it low. If you're doing 10 hours like Steve Vai, vary it up a bit, naturally. Number 13, practicing stuff you already know. Practice what you don't know, or at least push your boundaries. So, if it's a lick you know but you want to get it faster, that's okay. But just noodling the same old stuff over and over again doesn't really work. Set goals, push those boundaries, learn new stuff. Number 14, not muting. This is fairly basic. Here's a power chord. Here's that same power chord without any muting. Now that sounds fine because we're in E, but let's imagine a thing like this song. Played without muting. I mean, it sounds worse than Kirk Hammett. Sorry, all you Kirk Hammett fans. I just can't stand it. So get your muting in order. There are tons of videos on that on YouTube. Number 15, comparing to others. Now, I think you should compare yourself to others, but in a way that you imitate them. You learn stuff from them. If you're stuck in a rut, imitating someone slightly different might get you out of that rut. But if you start comparing yourself, let's say you want to become like Yngwie Malmsteen and you're not quite there yet, let's face it, who is? Comparing yourself to him and thinking that you're hugely inferior will do nothing for your confidence. It'll just ruin it, and it will make it harder for you to reach that goal because it will get in the way of your self-belief. And this goes back to setting goals. Set those goals and check how you're progressing. Measure progress from time to time in comparison to whichever guitar players you want to emulate. And make it a few, and those can change over time because new ideas are combinations of old ideas. So, check out more lessons here and join me on Patreon. You get access to all of my music lessons, a bunch of exclusives. You can even take that stuff for free. There's a link in the description. I hope to see you in another one. Take care. Goodbye.